Good afternoon. My name is Phil Hutchinson of BDG Work Futures. I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about the subject of the office and why the office is an important tool for improving business performance and employee loyalty. Okay. Now, our topic today really can be seen as quite a complex area, but we prefer to see this as a simple equation of space, and by space we mean the buildings that you occupy. An equation of people, that's your staff and your colleagues. And we believe that the optimum combination offers the best business improvements by bringing together space in the correct manner and people. And by that we mean that by space we mean the improvements that you might see might relate to efficiency of the space. They might also relate to flexibility in terms of how you use the space in the future. And with regards to people, to staff, that relates to the attraction and retention of staff. It relates to employee motivation and the development of ownership and pride in the workplace. And these perhaps softer elements are those that we see as equally important in terms of making the optimum workplace. So what might the benefits actually be? Well, if you can see on the screens here, we've got a number of examples here. At the bottom here, we have a government agency where we have the ability to save £4.5 million per annum through a major co-location, a rationalisation of real estate, and also through new ways of working. We have a solution here where actually during a project, just simply by understanding how furnishings and furniture and the reuse of products could be brought together to save over $1 million for a project. And now those are real benefits in terms of cost, in terms of value. But we shouldn't forget that perhaps at the bottom, on the bottom right, there's an example really where we're talking about how employees view the space. And that question that was being asked really was about employee satisfaction. Do the staff feel comfortable and happy with the space? And I think you can see on the graph, they do agree. So, how can we improve the business through this optimum combination of people and of space? We believe the answer is through actually understanding the business and understanding the business in some detail. So, there are a number of tools and processes that are available. We believe that architects and designers must all have these tools and bring them to the projects with our clients to enable us to understand what's actually relevant, to understand how businesses work, how business benefits can be accrued, and how employee retention and satisfaction can be attained, and with that all of the attendant business benefits. So there are four areas that we'd like to look at. We'd like to look at activity and occupancy. Now, what we mean by activity and occupancy really is how you can use your space more efficiently. We'd like to look at brand, and by that we mean the brand and the culture of the organisation and how the space can best reflect that culture, that brand and that business. We'd like to touch on communications, and that's really how engaging with staff and employees helps us to actually understand their needs and how they can actually contribute towards making the space more effective for the business. And then finally, we want to talk about, just show a few examples of recognising that improvement is actually ongoing, and we can actually measure that, but we can also treat that as an ongoing process to show that benefits can and continue. So I want to just very quickly show you a couple of examples here. So I hope you can see the screen here, and here. What you're looking at here is a very simple review of how space is actually being used in the building. So on the right-hand side, you can see a brief review of what's happening in a building at a particular time of day and a particular time of the week, and each of the coloured squares relate to a workspace. So what that tells us is two things which are really important. One of them is the space being used? Clearly yes or no. And secondly, what activity is taking place? And it's the blend of those two that allows us to demonstrate a greater efficiency for the space and a more appropriateness of the space. So that's occupancy and activity. If we look at understanding brand, and that's ensuring that the workspace that you have is in tune with the corporate culture, then this is very much a process of assessing, understanding what your current brand is. It's about auditing it, and we'll show you an example in just one second. And it's also about providing the right solution, and the right solution isn't always a wholesale change. Sometimes it's just a very simple overlay or an addition to an existing space. So an example of an audit, we've got them here on the screen, and what we're looking at here really is the top line, which is in blue, illustrates how important the subject is. So actually how important is that particular subject, and the line below actually is how well it's performing at present, and that's a perceived value based on workshops and interviews with staff. What we're simply looking at is that gap analysis, and what that ensures is that we focus our time and attention and our clients' resources and money on only the areas that that are relevant. Two slides on communications. The first one really is how do we engage with staff in a wholesale manner? How do we actually get the maximum value out of talking with staff, engaging with staff? We use simple electronic questionnaires. Here's one that we've used on a project last year. And again, what this gives us is a very clear response of what the entire organisation, everybody who's responded to that questionnaire, which can well be 60 or 70% of the company on a good return. And the interesting thing for us, if you look at the areas shaded in yellow, I'm not sure you can see them, but I can tell you those areas, they relate to things that such as comfort, air conditioning, cooling, natural light, those sort of qualities. So we as architects and designers might like to think that actually it's the look, the feel, the dynamic approach to the space. But actually, when we talk to staff and employees, what they tell us actually is that that it's also about getting the important basics right as well. So very interesting for us. And sometimes when we want to drill down and understand in more detail, then we can start to talk to staff in focus groups and workshops on a one-to-one basis. Now, it's all very well adding our understanding and the information that we require to bring together for the project. What's equally important for us is to recognise the fact that when we've carried out projects, when projects are finished, is that there's a review and evaluation, and a post-occupancy review is the tool that allows us to understand actually where we've delivered value. So the chart we're looking at here is for a project for KPMG. Everything in red at the top is a positive statement. Everything in blue below the line is a negative statement that we received from our feedback. For us, it's important to focus attention on the blue areas, the negative areas, but also to recognise some of the areas where we can actually improve on an ongoing basis. So post-occupancy evaluation is not just about reviewing the project, but it's actually about how we make sure that we get continual improvement on the work that we all do in designing the best offices. And clearly another way of understanding whether a project has been successful is reviewing reviewing just how efficiently that space has been used. And at the beginning of the project, we talked about utilisation, and we showed you a chart that showed you how the office was being utilised. Equally important, we should be comparing how well the office is being used afterwards, and clearly what we can see here is there's a 25% increase in how well the office is occupied, but equally what we can start to see when we look at this chart in more detail, we can understand actually how the space is being used, what type of activities are being held, and perhaps a small point of interest for us is that if you look at the, if I can just show you the bottom chart on the right hand side, you'll see the days of the week, Monday to Friday, and the top, Monday to Friday. So this project certainly provided a more even balance of staff in the office from Monday to Friday, so that was a true positive for them. Okay, now we'd like to really just take the last few minutes of the time that we have here to talk about 4 case studies that we have. And the case studies that we have are for PricewaterhouseCoopers, for Siemens, for Skanska, and for STS, one of our recent projects here in Moscow. So all international companies, with a flavour of needs and understandings that I hope you'll recognise here today. All of those clients undertook a move, or they substantially refurbished their office. All of them recognise the benefits that change can bring to, and the opportunity that you can take when you change your environment. And all of them used the tools that we discussed, or the processes that we discussed, in terms of actually undertaking the project. So they used those tools of understanding how space is being used, of engaging with staff and with reviewing the space afterwards. And they all realised benefits in performance to the business and in employee loyalty, but some in a different way. So we're going to use these case studies as a mechanism for showing you those examples. So firstly, PricewaterhouseCoopers. This was a project for just over 1,000 staff. As I mentioned, it was a major refurbishment program. There was a significant increase in efficiency for this project. So if you can read on the screen here, after the project was completed, we accommodated an additional 100 people by doing nothing. We increased utilisation from 58 to 72%, and we provided a space which was more efficient in terms of space per person. But probably, most significantly on this project, the largest benefit that the business saw was that because of the way the office was arranged, and because of the way that people worked, and they worked together with greater collaboration, and this is what the office allowed them to do and enabled them to do, they saw what they describe as cross-referrals. So that's one part of the business talking to another part of the business, actually up by 25% in the first year. So I can't quantify that in terms of the number of dollars or pounds benefit, but that's significant to the business in terms of showing benefit. Now, Siemens was a new headquarters campus, 4 buildings for 2,500 staff. What's interesting for us here is that sometimes the most relevant feedback that we get is less about hard data, but it's actually about what we get by talking to the organisation. So amongst our review with Siemens here, we conducted a number of in-depth interviews. The interesting thing, if you can read the quotes that we've got here, really is that we're getting the same message, right from Andreas Goss, who's the CFO, at the top of the business, right down to members of staff that and what they're all saying, it really is how we've actually assisted in this project to get a greater level of collaboration between staff and generally improve people's well-beings, which will allow them to do their job more effectively. Skanska's headquarters building was about 8,000 square metres for 600 staff. Skanska wanted to address two particular issues in their move. One of them was increased communication, so better communication between staff, and the second one was a greater level of staff satisfaction. So they had a huge amount of turnover, and they were having trouble trying to retain their staff and attract new staff. For those issues were very important. We can see on the diagram here that the chart that we reviewed how people felt about the impact of the new working office on their motivation. And if we just add up those who said yes, either very much so, or yes, just a little bit, we've got 65%, and that's a considerable number of people who are very simply saying, that in this new office, I feel that I can participate better, I feel that I'm better motivated, and therefore I can deliver, more appropriate work to the business. So, very clear, simple, and solid information on how that's provided a benefit. And incidentally, in doing that project, our review stated that we actually accommodated 30% more people in less space than they had before. So, so for Skanska, that truly is, it's improving business performance and it's employee loyalty on both counts. Now the last project that we're going to show you is STS. So STS recently moved into the Monarch development, and this is one of our recent projects. And recognition and staff satisfaction and business satisfaction came in quite a different way here. But I think it's interesting that we share this with you because it's equally relevant as part of that mix of understanding how you can contribute to Brewer's business. And this really came through sort of recognition and pride in their own office. Last year at Office Next, STS were fortunate enough to receive a special frame award for their office in recognition of the space. And as recently as this year, Headhunter magazine recognised STS actually as the best employer in the Moscow region. So as an organisation, that's a very good recognition of the fact that you're looking after your staff, and through doing that you'll be receiving the business benefit or the greater emphasis on business that we all want. So thank you very much. That concludes my presentation. That's about.